afternoon. The Commissioners Task Force, the November 5th meeting of the Commissioners Task Force is called to order. The meeting is live streamed on YouTube so that the public may observe and listen. We want to welcome to everybody that's following us online. And today's agenda has been provided. Are there any changes? And if there are none, a motion to approve would be in order.
This is Bert, and I move to approve with flexibility if needed.
Sounds like a good plan. Is there a second to that motion?
Adam Thomas, second.
Okay, the motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed, motion carries. Then now if you'll review the minutes of the October 8th meeting, are there any additions or corrections? If not, a motion would be in order to approve.
This
So
is
moved,
Bert.
Mr. Chair.
Janet Eaton makes the motion. Is there a second?
Adam
Bert
Thomas,
Lewis.
second.
Okay, multiple seconds. We'll give it to Adam. All in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed? It appears that the motion carries. And at this point, last time I called on the wrong person, but today, Doug, I believe you're online to
I
bring us up to date.
think so, if I can get this to work.
And Doug, welcome to the task force meeting.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Pleasure's all ours. Yes.
So I think we all know why we're here, so let's get to it. Status update. So in today's slate, you've got 29 new plans for approval. 23 districts have submitted some change requests, which will add an additional $3 million to what has been planned for. If you approve everything today, that'll bring us to 272 out of the 286 districts. Our slide says that we have 8 additional under review as of Tuesday, and as of this morning, we have 11 that are currently under review. So we're getting close. Just to show that to you again, 243 plans have been approved by you all and the state board, 279 million. 23 changes today that'll bring their total for those districts to 20 million. Like I said, that's an additional 3 million to what's already been approved by the task force and the board. 29 new plans today, 7.4 million. We're down to 3 plans that have not been submitted, but those are in progress. And plans that have been submitted and are under review is now at 11. A lot of small districts in this group. Biggest one is El Dorado, I believe. Poverty runs in that 40 to 60% range for a majority of them. The plans that have been submitted represent pretty much their whole allocation with a little bit left over. And as we go through all of these change requests, that brings our cumulative total up to covering most of the money. So we're getting there. Where we're at now, after today, it will, just based on the new plans, that'll put us at $286.5 million that's been planned for, leaving 57 million. And like I said, the change requests represent another 3 million. So that puts us close to $290 million that's been planned for out of the 343.5 million. The allocable categories or allowable categories, we are still running about 66% for that teaching and learning block. Still working on how we can flesh out premium pay out of those category 16, those other activities. So we don't have that accounted for yet. The quarterly reporting, the narrative that goes with that, we're getting some ideas about possibly how to present that based on that work. So we haven't forgot it, but it's still in the works. today's plans, they had $7.8 million at their disposal. Plans represent 7.4 million of that total. We've got one ineligible request at $12,000. Expenditures per district runs from 51,000, which is Tri-Plains, up to 1.5 million, which is El Dorado. The range or the average per student is 619. That's $279 at the bottom for Hodgman County, which is only 60% of their allocation, up through $1,500 a student, which is Elk Valley. The allowable activities for this one, since it's a lot of small districts and not a large amount of money, I think it skews our allowable activities a little bit as we look at the percentages, but we're just under 50% for teaching and learning in this group.
Okay, are there any questions related to the pre-read on the eligible? Seeing none, let's move ahead, Doug.
Okay, we do have one ineligible request, and this is $12,000 for an ESOL para. We do not believe there is a COVID link for this. This is a basic educational requirement that we provide services, both state law and federal law, that we provide services to EL students. This does not have a COVID tie.
Are there questions there? Seeing none, and if I miss a question, we can always go back at some point. Let's move ahead.
Okay. The change requests, I'll go through these pretty quickly. As you look at Doniphan West, what they've asked for brings their total up to the full amount, and that's for premium pay. Erie, Galesburg, and Bonner Springs are just moving some money around. Erie to make room for some premium pay. Bonner Springs for before and after school programs. Ulysses, Frontenac, and Marmaton Valley, each of these represents using up the rest of their allocations. And you can see that a lot of that's going to premium pay. Iola, Humboldt, and Phillipsburg. Iola is using up the rest of theirs for some technology. This month, you're going to see some that actually go down in what they're asking. They're finding that things that they had budgeted for aren't costing as much as they had originally anticipated. So that's freeing up some funds. So those are the numbers in red that you're going to see on a few of these this month. Valley Falls, Perry, and Marysville. Same things. Valley Falls, that uses up the rest of their allocation. And then Perry and Marysville, things came in under budget. So that's going to free up some money for them to resubmit more changes. Garnett, Solomon, and Douglas. Garnett made room for some premium pay. Solomon used up the rest of their allocation for some curriculum. And Douglas's, the substitutes or the personnel weren't costing as much as they had thought to start with. Gossel, Hiawatha, and Canton Galva. Gossel and Hiawatha, that will represent the rest of their allocations or their awards. These are all going for premium pay. Canton Galva just moved some things around to allow for that premium pay. And then Leote, Hayes, and Lawrence. Leote, this uses up the rest of their allocation. Hayes is using move money around for summer school, and I think it's that the summer school didn't cost as much as they anticipated, so they moved it into some other buckets. And then Lawrence the same way to make room for premium pay. And then Parsons and Labette County. Parsons, that's the rest of their allocation, working on their HVAC. And then Labette County, and Lori will have to correct me on this one, but either it's the Chromebooks, laptops, and iPads didn't cost as much as they thought they were going to, or they bought more, but I don't remember which was which. But you can see there at the end that these net changes, then the pluses and minuses is $3 million for those change requests on top of the 17 that was already approved by you all. Doesn't change the allowable categories very much. We're still sitting right at 66%.
Any questions? If not, we are ready to vote on the, is that right? We're ready to vote on the ESSER 2? Is that right, Doug?
Yeah,
Okay. Questions or a motion?
This is Bert Lewis, and I move we accept the changes and new allocations that were just presented.
Is there a second to that motion? Mike Argabright seconds that motion. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed? It looks to me like that passes unanimously, at least the ones I can see. Application is not submitted. I assume that this needs to be updated.
yep. Now I've lost my ability to advance my slide.
You want me to call up the slideshow, Doug? I've got it.
Yeah,
available?
you got it, because I'm froze.
Can you unshare? Oh,
Yep.
there we go. Okay.
Okay, it's about, there we go, right there. Now, apparently 3 of these have already, in
Yes, so we
progress now?
we can scratch Kingman, Norwich, Southern Cloud, and McLouth off of our list of have not submitted. And then Fort Leavenworth, Lansing, and Syracuse have logged in and are in process. So the deadline is next Friday, the 12th, and we anticipate that they will have those submitted, and we will move on, and everyone will have submitted a plan.
If you have not used all of your money by then, by the 12th, if you have not applied for all of your money by the 12th of November, do you have options to recapture that at some point in the future?
Yes, all we need from districts is that original plan. Once we have the original plan, we actually award the full amount to the district, but they can only draw down the amount that has been approved by the task force and the state board. But that we have met our obligation to allocate all the funds as soon as we get that original plan. So then they've got until 2023 for ESSER 2 funds to make those adjustments and spend that money.
And I apologize for asking that question. After I ask it, I realized I've already asked it 2 or 3 times over this period of time, and you always give me the same answer. So I guess that's pretty consistent.
You are not the only one who asked that question multiple times.
Okay, now we had at the last meeting, we decided that we were going to review the ineligible recommendations on the EANS 2. And I believe, Tate, you're going to take this over at this point.
Yes, I will. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Like Chairman Porter said last week, you approved everything that was recommended or last month you approved everything that was recommended as eligible for EANS 2, and you wanted us to bring back some more information on some of the items that were deemed ineligible. And most of the items that are being brought back that were ineligible, one of the main reasons was on a lot of the items we provided a reason, and on these that were brought back, there was a question on one we did, and the rest of them, there was not a reason with them. So we've provided that for you in a PDF that we will be going through here shortly. But we just wanted to bring this slide back just as a reminder that, for both ESSER and EANS, we talk about reasonable, necessarily, and allocable. When we talk about allocable, that's one of those 12 allowable uses that we've talked about. And then again, because we are working with our private schools, we talk about these services must be secular, neutral, and non-ideological. So at this point, I will call up the same PDF that we provided for this meeting. And I want to give a big thank you to Janet Eaton on the task force, who put the original one together, gave it to us so we could put our review in. I made a few adjustments, and then she went back and made a really good, or noticed really good thing that would have been helpful. She added the original explanation in. So everything really that we need to discuss would be in this document. So as we're going through this document, there were 32 total items asked for us to look at. Most of those were single items, some of them very similar. So we can go through those. There was one when we re-reviewed it, we determined it should have been deemed eligible. We'll get to that on line 5. And then there were 2 that are not allowable, lines 9 and 32. The rest we've put in our reasoning, and we'll go through this and let the task force make the decisions on how you would like us to go forward with these. But along with that, one of the things.
Let's stop now. Tracy has a question. Go ahead, Tracy.
I have to unmute. I forgot how to do all this Zoom stuff since we're back to normal now. Yeah, my question is this, on the second one for Sacred Heart, if they're receiving IEP supplemental services remotely from the public school teachers, I mean, I know our kids are using headphones and microphones in order to access the teachers in the other buildings. So I don't see how that's not related. It's because the SLPs and the counselors are not going into the buildings. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean.
So how is that ineligible then?
Well, that's not how we were reading it. So
Well,
that's kind of why it was brought back.
But does that make sense? And other people that actually work in school buildings here, is that that's how our supplemental service providers in COVID are meeting with a lot of the kids, so that they have minimal face-to-face contact. And if the child is receiving services in the back of the classroom, they probably would need a headset, so that especially if it's something like counseling, so that other children in the room are not hearing what the child, what their IEP services are.
Okay. And that's kind of like that first line we put on our response. That's not how we were reading it. So that's one of the reasons I think these are being brought to the task force.
But does that make sense? I mean, that's how I'm taking why they're asking for it, because that's what we do.
I would also add that I think there was some reasonableness associated with this, the cost of the ones, because we've seen a lot of headsets go through that didn't cost this much.
Yeah, that's what I think. That's a very high price, unless it's I don't know how many children we're talking about. But I don't know if they're buying Beats or what kind of fancy stuff they're buying, because you can probably get cheap stuff at Aldi. But I mean, I do think headsets is a legitimate expenditure for children who are receiving remote services.
And that's a good point too, Tracy. Whenever we're approving stuff like this, if we choose to approve this one, we do typically put in a statement that when the service centers go to buy these, they might not get the exact type, but the service centers will work with them to meet the need, whatever their needs are. So if that's the reason of that, the service centers would work with us, and we would get appropriate ones that could fulfill the need, but not be overly expensive.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, and my understanding, and this is something that I approve, we're going to go through these one at a time. And so as there are questions like Tracy just brought up, and then at the end, we'll make a decision. And we may have to make decisions on several separately. But if you feel strongly about that, Tracy, whenever the time comes at the end, you may want to ask us to reconsider that one or anything that's similar to that. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. I just know that we do that for gifted services in our district. The teachers are not traveling into multiple buildings and the kids do have headsets in the public school buildings. I don't know what's going on in the parochial, but they're in their classrooms with headsets on.
Okay. Any other question? That was number one, right? Sacred Heart and Emporia.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, Tate.
And before I go on, I had one other note I wanted to kind of make before we got into this that's really important. Last month, both the task force and the state board had to pass all your things with a pending final approval from U.S. Department of Education. I have great news to announce that we have received that. We did get that final approval at the 20%. So everything that you voted on pending is now good to go last month. And the 20% for Kansas was approved.
Very good news. Thank you.
So as we go down to number 2, this we have a couple different ones throughout here. This was one that it was to purchase 900 envelopes for a school of 168 kids. And basically what it came to us was it seemed a little unreasonable for the amount, but what they're doing is where typically in the past our teachers would hand out papers and notes. Now they're putting them in individual envelopes, so multiple people might not be handling those. They're putting in envelopes that, would maybe go, one envelope would go home to Bert's family, one would go home to Doug's family. And so that's what they were discussing here. We thought 900 seemed like a lot for 168 kids, but it was also over the 3-year period.
So I could speak to that one if I could. I know that sounds like a lot, but they come in packs of 100. And so when you have 168 kids, you're going to need to order 2 packs. And they also have a high summer enrollment. And so that's where the 900, I know it sounds large, but if you really spread that out over the years, they're just ordering 2 or 1 every time they order. And if you just refer to the blue columns of, whether that's questionable or not, we approved a school at $10,000 worth of envelopes as well.
On the issue of reasonableness, I probably should keep my mouth shut, but it seems to me like you're going to send something home 3 or 4 times a year. That covers it. It's going to take 900. Moving ahead, we'll come back if we need to.
Okay, number 3 was for a color jet printer. And the reasoning was to 6th through 8th grade students to print their assignments in classrooms and for social distancing to avoid clustering in the copy room. So our questions were, is truly a color printer needed? And if we're doing these things electronically, would they be better off to be submitted electronically? There were 3 similar meanings. One was to stay in the classroom for students. The other 2 were for staff use.
And were they ineligible in each one?
No, they're
No.
eligible.
Yeah, anything here in the second blue column are the ones that were deemed eligible.
Okay.
And that was kind of the comparison that they wanted us to check on for the consistency.
Okay.
So I think on that, we approved one for a classroom of use already, and this is a school asking for classroom use. And what we approved was color. And so that was the argument I was trying to understand the reasoning why that would be unexplained or not approved.
Okay, any other comments? Come back if we need to. Next one.
Jim, sorry, I was raising my hand, so I was trying to be nice. This is Bert. I just have a question. On this color printer and that had been approved previously, and am I correct that in possibly when this runs out, would those go back to the service center then, or would that be something that would be deemed needed by the school and not necessarily need to go back to the service center?
It would be a piece of equipment, so it would either have to come back to the service center in the state, or that private school could purchase it at fair market value at that time.
Thank you.
Have a question from Adam Profit.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm trying to make heads and tails of the request and then the reason here, and I wasn't able to trace this back to the original request. So I don't have the details. But it seems to me that the students are, the way I read it anyway, the students are printing to a copy room today, and the request is to put a printer in the room. So I guess my question would be, why does it matter if we're talking about a color printer versus black and white? If we're just talking about a printer in a separate location to reduce clustering in one area, seems to be reasonable, but I could be missing the details on that.
And I think our focus was more on, could it be done electronically, more than the actual color printer piece.
And I understand that and certainly appreciate the question. I guess my question is, are they doing it electronically today, or are they printing it into a copy room today and going to the copy room to pick them up? And if that's the case, I don't know that, moving the goalpost, so to speak, by, having them switch to an electronic form would be the right move.
And
Janet, do you know the answer to that question about what they're doing now?
Yes, they're going into another room.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
well, the next one, line 4, was for 3 projectors for resource teachers that are working with different MTSS grade level groups, which are typically ESOL or at-risk subsets in small groups. Our concern was if they're working in small groups, do they truly need a projector? Because typically we're going to be seeing 3 to 5 to 8 kids. And so that is why we did not, whoops, sorry about that. We did not think that was reasonable to buy projectors specifically for small group work.
I would just question on that one, Tate. I think we're judging the space that they may have available to be used when we're questioning that whether they need it or not, and just the distance that our teachers may need to be away from the students. And so I think that that's the reason I would say they're requesting that.
Okay, I heard somebody, but I didn't know who it was, and I could. Go ahead.
Oops, sorry. The line 5 was the one when we re-looked at it and looked at our notes. This was not a duplicate request. It was actually a continuation of a previously approved one. So we feel this is one that definitely, when you guys vote today, should be on the eligible list. Line 6 was a subscription for a music class for students to participate when they're in quarantine. Talked again about their ESOL and at risk, losing the opportunity previously to participate in the fine arts. Our concern was if they were in hybrid or remote, should they be getting a different curriculum, or should they be getting the same curriculum as the students attending in school? And the referenced eligible amount from the first time was a summer school music program.
Moving ahead.
Number 7 was flexible seating for students who are demonstrating above average anxiety and emotional strain. We questioned if that's what flexible seating is to be used for. There's also a question as there was some feeling that this was not an allowable use under the 12 items. Because typically what we would see with flexible seating, it would be more for social distancing and not for the anxiety. And in Eanes 1, the approved ones were for the social distancing.
And Janet, you don't have to sign in because you're the expert on these areas and know more about it than the rest of us. You just have an open mic anytime you want it.
Okay, thank you.
As long as you don't sing.
Well, you don't want me to sing, so. And I just want to briefly go back to, and Michaela, first of all, I'm not sure that link that you sent me is if the schools are not being able to access that. So if I could just ask for the link again for the public link. If we could go back just on the music subscription real quick on that one. I think, again, we're just reading into what a student on quarantine or hybrid, what they can and cannot take part in music class. And if they're out for the 11 days, what this would allow them to do. And again, a proposal was approved for the summer school for almost $10,000, and this school is asking for $600. On the flexible seating, I think we're, again, either the school didn't write in as they maybe wanted to or should have, but above average anxiety and emotional strain due to the COVID-19 has an impact on learning. And so again, had we not approved anything on flexible seating, I might feel differently, but we did. And so that would be my point on that one.
Okay, Frank?
Well, I would just say that it depends on what kind of flexible seating we're buying. I mean, there are a lot of chairs that are specifically designed for students with anxiety because they don't like to sit still. So I don't know what the purchase is, but flexible seating actually is used for this purpose.
Okay, thank you. Moving ahead.
Line 8 was absorbent powder to clean up vomit. Typically is what we're seeing. We'll see this a couple times. One of the questions that came up was we did approve this in Eanes 1 during like March and April. One of the things is you look at the CDC information, the guidance that we've called out here is that less than 10% of people with COVID have GI distress, and only part of that is the vomiting piece. So we questioned, with the knowledge we have now, would this be allowable? Because that is a small increase compared to what's normal. So should the building already have enough to cover the small increase? Was why we had deemed it ineligible originally this round.
And we'll see that again, I think, some more. Go ahead.
Yes. Line number 9 was mental health for staff, which unfortunately in Eanes 1 and 2 is not allowable. What we have seen is quite a bit for students. We can provide professional development for our teachers to teach and to work with students suffering from mental health, but it's not an actual allowable expense for the actual teachers be getting the mental health services.
So let me make sure I understand this. Of the ones that we've talked about so far, the one that would actually by law be ineligible, not questioned, is this one.
Correct.
Is that where we are right now?
Yes, that's correct.
I mean, we've had questions about everything else, but you're telling us, and I believe you, that this is an ineligible. This is by regulations ineligible. There's
Correct.
no gray.
Correct.
Okay, go ahead.
Number 10 would be similar to our powder above. It's a glass cleaner to reduce the spread of COVID. And so again, that's one of those things as we've seen, the touch is still important, but it's not as much as in the past. So there's questions of, are we truly transmitting through that? And so that's why we deem the glass cleaner as ineligible.
Okay, go ahead.
Number 11 was a concern in one classroom.
Just put you on
That-
the bottom of my.
They were needing a sound system to aid the teacher speaking through a mask because they were unable to hear, the students were unable to hear the teacher. So we were questioning, how has this been going on so far in the school year? If they haven't been able to hear the teacher, and why is only one room affected? The reference similar request was actually a microphone system that was to be provided to remote learners.
I could speak to this again.
Correct.
This,
Go right ahead.
I know this is a school. I don't know about all schools, but I know in particular, this is a school that it has been masking all year. And if you try to teach with a mask and you have a classroom that's a fairly large class size, which this is, it is difficult to hear. And we have had the complaints of that. And this is a school that wouldn't have the resources without gifts like this of that we could afford it.
Okay, moving ahead.
Our next one is a poverty simulation. They talked about social emotional growth due to constant disruption of learning. Where we were struggling is no COVID tie specifically to the poverty piece. I mean, there's no doubt this is an excellent professional development, but we really struggled with the tie of how the poverty piece is tying back to the COVID tie.
And my question on that is, it is almost I think it is the same wording that we approved, and I did notice that it's the very same dollar that we approved before.
I did a poverty simulation once and I died.
Your character died, I think, Mr. Porter.
Oh,
Tate,
it was one of those things I didn't want to ever do again because it's so revealing. Go ahead.
Tate was that identical request approved before?
I believe
It was.
so. I don't have it called up exactly,
I have it.
but if it is, we should probably go with that. It's one of those that it's in the gray area. So
Okay.
we would not have a problem with that.
I know it was approved, and I actually sat in on a little bit of the information that school has started.
And everybody, please note on the Tracy's comment, did make a comment, so please refer to that. Go ahead.
Okay, our next one was an iPad and carpet combination where it's a multi-sensory and multimodality, where the carpets and the iPad work together. They talked about how their students have been struggling. So they were talking about using, especially with the younger kids, using this combination. We didn't feel the combination was at a reasonable cost. And so that's why we deemed it ineligible originally.
If I might react to that, because it's,
Yeah,
I'm
you
familiar with that.
Yes, you may.
And I'm going to be very generic when it comes down to the rural schools. And I've spoken to this with Tate before. about what reasonable cost is defined as, especially the smaller rural schools where, in this situation, I know that there's multiple buildings and they try the social distancing. I know the iPads were being used from a hygiene standpoint, and it was part of the package. But because it was a small enrollment, it did not seem to be a reasonable cost. I have a problem with who makes that decision.
Okay, we are talking about number 13, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, number 14 was mostly a request for math stackers, which are math manipulatives. In the request, they talked about that students had already been provided these as a set per student. So we questioned whether they would need more if they already had one set per student previously.
And my only question on that would be, I'm assuming that you verified that they needed more because maybe they were short because of other reasons. So I have no real definitive area there except to see if they needed just more supplies as a continuation of what they were doing.
Okay. Go ahead.
So on line 15, these were decodable readers of Haggerty phonics. In this building, we had a total of 21 plus different requests for additional curriculum. Some of these items were approved in their list. We'll talk about some more later on another line item, which we were asked to combine. So this is one of the reasons this was part of that group, but not in the same order where the other 21 are all combined in a straight line. So we questioned the reasonability of the amount of extra curriculum that they were requesting for a building with 81 students.
I would be happy to chime in on that one. I find that if I'm right on, we're on line 15, that's a $64 request. And this school, what I really respected them for is they itemized every single thing where we have approved schools that have just listed ELA resources or mathematics resources. But whoever did this took the time to itemize every single item, including down to $64.
So this entire request is just $64, right?
This one line item, yes, sir.
Okay, go ahead. And when I say we're going ahead, that means we're not ignoring anything anybody says. We're going through the process, and then we'll come back and deal with it at some point in the. And
So
when we get to the end, Frank will answer your question, because I have the same question.
Okay, line 16 was more of the absorbent powder that we talked about earlier. Line 17 was the utility glass cleaner, which we discussed earlier as well. Line 18 was similar to line 2, which we had different people speak about the envelopes and the folders. Go home. The next few are all from the same building in various curriculum. And this appeared to us to be core curriculum for a self-contained grade level. So we were questioning what the need for changing the core curriculum was, because all that was brought up was the remote or hybrid learning. and not why there was a true need to change that current curriculum.
So on the first one of the $5,000 request, that is almost again, word for word, request of what the school 1894 made, which we approved for 20,000.
Okay. And number 20?
And number 20 was similar. It was the system for K2 reading resources in both print and digital form for the stable classrooms. Excuse me. And we had the same feeling that appeared to be a self-contained grade level. So we were questioning why there was a need for a new core curriculum in the classroom.
So in both of these, 19 and 20, if I had additional students or things like that, that'd be one thing. But if I'm adopting a regular curriculum, that's the responsibility of the school district. Is that my understanding?
For the most part, we've seen a couple instances on the public side where they had the data to show that the core curriculum they were using was not effective through looking at the data. But for the most part, yes, that's correct.
And do we have that same information from these two schools about the curriculum they're using is not effective?
We did not receive that, no.
So is this,
I just add, we also didn't ask for that to my knowledge, but I think that it's a very similar situation as what Nick, I think, was the one that was speaking of earlier, of just, or in Hutchinson. So it's not a super rural area, but certainly an area of need.
okay,
21 and 22 were both similar. 21 was for art, 22 for science. How we read this was that they didn't have these prior to COVID. Because of COVID, they had learning loss, and we struggled with, they didn't have this material prior. How did they have a learning loss if we're just buying it new? So that is kind of where we were struggling with these two.
okay, we have two questions from Frank in the chat box. One, what was the total for all the items involved? And is Holy Cross using remote or hybrid models this year? Can somebody answer either or both of those questions?
Well, for the total of all 5 of these requests,
I
it's
think this
approximately-
is the request, the entire request for all 21.
oh, that was for St. John. Yep.
Yeah, the
We've got-
question is if I'm assuming the question is if all of these were approved, what would the amount be?
Actually, it was, Tate had said that the same school that with the $64 amount was one of 21 different curriculum things that I think all were approved, and this was one that wasn't. I was trying to,
Oh, okay.
I mean, so.
Yeah, Janet
I-
provided that on line 31. For the 21 that are together, it was approximately $7,400. And then the one that we've already talked about was, I believe, $68 or $69.
Okay, I'm sorry, Frank, I misinterpreted your question. So. And then is Holy Cross using remote or hybrid models this year? Does anybody know?
They're not, they're using exactly what the state has allowed us to use. So when kids are having to be quarantined, they are. I did look up because it is a school I'm familiar with. The current curriculum does not allow any online feature.
And these curriculum that they're asking for, this curriculum they're asking for does allow for
Yes.
remote
Yes.
or,
Mhm.
okay.
And then I would just add, as we're now on that art and science one, I think, again, we just have to be careful not to assume, for example, on the science, I found the point of if science was not previously provided, well, I can't imagine a school not providing science. So I think we have to assume that they were, but our kids missed out on hands-on experiences, and these science kits, I'm just gonna guess, would help them provide that. And I would maybe say to the same on the art.
Okay, I'm going to summarize. There's been discussion on virtually everything. Number 5, the department is recommending that we approve number 5, and I believe it was number 9. I may have the number 9 wrong.
9 is correct. That's
That
the not
is-
allowable.
That is where there's no gray area.
Correct.
At this point, we have to make a decision, and we're open for discussion.
Well, we still have some more to go through, Chairman.
Oh, I'm
Porter.
sorry. I'm sorry.
There are 32 total.
Okay. I jumped the
Um,
gun.
The next one, when we reviewed this again this morning, we didn't get our full answer in, because as you can tell, there is a COVID tie. But got to find my notes here, where I wrote it down. There was actually what we had originally that didn't get copied correctly, was there was not a COVID tie to the direct need of the social emotional, which is similar to some of the things we've already discussed today.
Okay. Moving ahead.
Number 24 is again our absorbent powder that we've talked about previously. Number 25 was to hire a school nurse that could care for students and families when they don't feel well. Our concern with this was that really these funds aren't provide for school nurses, provide for the COVID part of that. And I think some of them maybe have called out better that they're just hiring somebody for the COVID portion of the nursing compared to what this one is called out in this one.
Okay, moving ahead.
Okay, the next one was for an integration specialist paraprofessional to work with individually with students. Here, it was a part-time paraprofessional. The actual request was for full-time. This was deemed ineligible in this specific one because through EANS 2, they've already had 2 resource teachers that were approved. And in EANS 1, both an extra certified teacher and a para have been approved for this building, of which had 91 students and 29 of those poverty. So we were questioning the reasonableness of this much additional staff for that size of a building.
So they already have several people performing this function at the school.
Either this function or very similar function, yes.
Okay. $27.
27 was available staff, specifically summer administration, to help with during the school year and summer camps. And this was a request to pay extra money during the school year and 163 hours each summer for administration, which we did not feel was reasonable. Already 20 hours for each summer had been approved for an administrative position in this building. And again, this is a building with approximately 90 to 95 students.
Yeah, this is a building with a principal change from the EANS 1 to the EANS 2. And I'm not for sure if that was a carryover then, maybe of just not for sure how that worked.
Okay, and Tracy, you have the question.
Yeah, the para salary and benefits are $135,000. That wasn't denied for being an unreasonable expense. Otherwise, I'm thinking maybe I need to apply up there.
That amount would have included the 2 resource teachers. So that would have been for the 2 resource teachers and the para.
Oh, okay, from
We
the
have-
description, that's kind of hard to
Right.
to see that.
And we've
Yep.
already approved the 2 resource teachers.
Yep, we approved the 2 resource teachers, yes.
Okay. Does that
But
answer
yeah.
your question, Tracy?
Yes, thank you for the clarification.
Okay.
We would have you anyway, Tracy.
I used to teach in Catholic school.
Would you pay her that much? I'm going to negotiate for you.
Yeah, for a para position, I think we could get a lot of people interested in 131,000.
That may very well solve the shortage.
Okay. I did want to come back because with Janet's comment about the principal change also made me think, if a position like this has been approved and they are struggling with the 20 hours, that is also something we've seen other buildings request a change request for, as they go forward, because we've had a lot of people that have been, that this past summer were extremely surprised on the amount of people that took advantage of summer schools in both the public and private schools. Okay, the next one was a new reading curriculum, K-8. We kind of talked about that similar before. Again, this one would help in the classroom and possibly help during a stay-at-home order as well. And so we struggled with, was there truly a COVID tie for a truly new curriculum at this?
It would be the same as what we had earlier on our list of what they have as curriculum would be a non-online, nothing, no features for that with what they have.
The next one is one indoor and one outdoor sensory path. We were struggling as we looked these up and read about them and viewed some online, how they help with alleviating the trauma caused by COVID. So that is why we struggled with this being eligible. Line
Right.
30 was a request for 30 document cameras, 10 for each year going forward. We seen that seemed to be a large amount. We also were concerned that if we bought 10 for each year, that third year, we would only be getting 1 year of use out of that as well.
Okay, go ahead.
The next one, line 31, was the request we talked about before and that Frank asked about as well. This was one elementary school of 81 students that asked for a large amount. And you can tell by the amounts, a fairly low cost additional curriculum for their school. We felt that was an extremely large amount and was not necessarily reasonable.
So if I can speak to just both number 30 and 31 back on the document cameras for 30, I understand their request did not include the word COVID. I think we could assume that the cameras would be used for that. But if my guess is that school put down 10, 10, and 10, not to ask for all 30 at one time. So for whatever that's worth. And then on the 21 items, and this is what I was referring to earlier, where this school literally itemized every single thing. And we've approved schools that have just listed it as resources, and we haven't questioned what exactly I'm sure it will be, monitored and certainly have to be exactly what we are saying with the schools that just said resources in general. But this is a school that truly itemized every item down to the wire.
Okay.
And then the last item that was an additional request for all schools, not allowable. Couple reasons. Number one, we didn't have a need or request from each of the schools. And also it came after the application period.
And Tate tells me, because I don't remember what I say every time on those Zooms, that I said Eames 2 when we really were talking about the deadline for ESSER 2. And so I apologize if I get anyone in trouble with my mistake on that.
No, that I understand, Dr. Watson, what you're referring to. I think my point on number 32 is, the Eames schools that applied for this, that qualified first and then it applied for it. This round, if I'm correct, there is no resubmitting of any additional or question or explanation other than I appreciate the chance to go through that today. So, the great insight of one school out of the 26 that put this down and it was approved, because we have the $25 million, that 75,000 would be a great way to help. Although my math is not quite correct on that, so.
And one of our concerns is also when we're audited, that will be looked at. And that's really our biggest concern, is having to pay that money back from the state.
Yeah, I understand.
That is a concern, but after he and Doug beat me up on, you said what? That wasn't what you were supposed to, you misspoke. So I want that to be out there, that they did take me to the woodshed. Also, I'm thinking about the audits.
Yeah, I get that. And the math is very wrong on that. So it's $750,000. So that's okay.
And Tate and Doug, it's Janet Waugh and my job to beat up on the commissioner, not yours.
Well, I do have to do full disclosure here, is we had been going over Eames for about a half hour with them, and he made the comment, we have a superintendent's meeting later today. Is there anything you want us to share? Well, since I'd been speaking, I continued to speak on that. And so that didn't help things. I think if Doug or Dean would have been the one that spoke up and had make that bridge from Eames back to ESSER, it might have worked out a little better. So it was a team effort on that one.
We got to take our shots when we get the opportunity.
I wish you would all be a little more serious. Okay, we have a decision to make, folks. So to move forward, we need some sort of motion. Frank.
So Tate, just except for number 5 and number 9 and number 32, which you believe are not legal, the rest of these, if they were approved, the chance is that if there is an audit of these schools, they were found to be ineligible, that school would be responsible for repaying that. Is that correct?
No, sir. The state of Kansas would be responsible.
Is that different than ESSER?
Yes, because you guys actually get the funds.
Got it.
And then I would just try to add to what Frank said. I think every other point on here, except for 29, add to that, we have approved with a different school already.
Adam, Profit.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There were several items that were some cleaning supplies, I think some Windex and some powder. what's our level of risk with those not being approved down the road? I think it is important to keep in mind that we're making decisions as we go with information that we have at a point in time. So I do respect the fact that we had a set of facts available to us when we approved them previously. If we have a different set of data available to us, I think we need to be cognizant of that as well, especially if the funds would be at risk.
My feeling is it's somewhat limited risk just because of all the processes we have in place. I mean, this meeting here is a great example. I mean, if we have, today, approximately 20 well-educated people discussing these items, that is where we would come from. If we were questioned, we'd say, here's our process. We had our initial review team, they felt borderline. Our secondary review team in-house felt borderline. We brought these as ineligible. We were asked by members of the task force to revisit them. The task force had the discussion, and through discussion with other educators and people throughout the state, we made a decision that we did field these. And that would be our first line of fighting this if any of these were brought up in an audit. So I would say our risk, my opinion, would be slim, but there's still that risk compared to some things that I think there's no doubt that are good and fine.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And I'm going to ask the same question about the areas where we talked about curriculum that does not have the digital component. And if we approve, that's a lot larger number. Is the answer the same?
Pretty much.
far
I
as what
think
our
some
risk
of
would
the
be.
stuff Janet and Nick shared and some other people shared, we would also, if something like this came up, be working with them. And I think what they shared helped that argument that they would be allowable, that, anything that has that online component, if they didn't already and they can show they had students, that's going to be a big help in the audit piece.
Adam, as budget director, are you the one that gets to pay it back if they have to pay it back?
Well, yeah, it would have to go into the budget. Yeah. And that's, in all seriousness, I mean, I do have concerns anytime the state funds are at risk. I understand our stated goal is to get the money out to the schools for the purposes of mitigating COVID and ensuring the schools are successful. So certainly want to take every opportunity we can to get the funds out there and let the schools do what they need to do. But yeah, I do need to be cognizant of any risk that would be placed on state dollars.
Okay.
I think it would be bad politically for the administration to pursue that. That's just my humble opinion, especially in upcoming election years. I don't think they're going to challenge it. I agree with Tate, though. There's minimal risk. But I respect what you're saying, Mr. Prophet, obviously. I think the minimal risk is good enough, just for the simple fact that I think it's bad politically for them to challenge it. Just my opinion.
Okay. I'm going to make sure I understand what you said. Adam Thomas, you think it'd be bad politically for us to approve, or for us to be questioned, or for the auditors to question it if we did approve it?
I think it would be bad for them to question it too deeply and I just personally think it's worth the risk for us to go through with this. And while I agree with Mr. Prophet's concerns, I just think right now it would be bad politically for them to question too much of what we're doing here.
And our concern is right now is probably more with federal auditors than state level auditors. And I do see a lot of hands popping up. So we've got a lot of people waiting in line for questions.
Okay, well, I'll check that.
I think
Okay, Frank, are you next? Or have you already asked? I've kind of gotten behind here. I got Frank, Tracy, Adam, Randy.
I think Tracy is next. I think she's been waiting.
Okay.
Yeah, Now, one thing, obviously, the situation on the ground has changed since this committee convened last spring. We're back in person. There's now legislation in place that, what is it, a 10-day limit, and only if they're on quarantine. So the amount of kids that are learning virtually has really decreased, learning virtually from home. That said, there is a lot of virtual learning, at least in Wichita, going on within the district with supplementary service providers who don't want to be working across 8 or 9 buildings and bringing COVID or germs into classrooms, especially for children that have fragile health issues, which many special education kids do have. So that's where I was going with the headphone thing. So my question is, do we need to take into account the fact that things have changed and some things that were approved in prior sessions now really might not be necessary? And I'm thinking particularly of the curriculum stuff, which as a practitioner, some of this seems to me that they want new curriculum. It's not necessarily COVID related. I mean, we would all love new curriculum, but will that come back to bite us? The second question is, what if the audit takes place after 2024? And what if it isn't the Biden administration who goes after? Now, will that, if it's a Republican administration, will they go after Christian schools? Perhaps less likely, but I think that's something we need to be thinking about. Do we want to jeopardize, anyone at KSDE for approving something that perhaps is really not eligible?
Okay, Nick?
Part of the problem I think that we're experiencing also is have a hard time when one school asks for a nurse and they use the word COVID specifically, and there's a whole slew of them that got that service, and then one school didn't do that good of a job and didn't get that service. And so and we really didn't have a standard in both AIDS 1 and AIDS 2, and we kind of limped along to do that. And some of these things can be rectified to make sure that we are legitimately doing what we say we were going to do. But the time has been so short, it's almost been an impossible task. I don't know how to change that, but I just don't think when it comes down to it, it's going back to servicing what we all wanted to do, to make sure that kids that were being left behind, whatever reason for COVID, that we pull everything along and move everything forward. And so I just really feel that this session was almost into the weeds of trying to figure out what's right and what's wrong and how to fix it.
Janet?
Okay.
Well, I don't know if you're ready for a recommendation, but I'm ready to make one.
I would like to make just a quick comment about what Nick said, because it reminded me something I'm not sure everybody on this is aware of. We've talked about our 2 review teams, you guys and the state board. There's also another line in this too. After we give it to the service centers, they are also checking for reasonability, making sure everything goes. And they have reached out to both the private schools and our agency as well when they have concerns. So I think there's also that line that can help us out. And we have not, when they've questioned anything, we've been able to approve it once they get follow-up information. So I just want to put that out there. We do have actually a 5th line of people looking at all of these when they're actually making the purchases and hiring the staff members.
Yes, Janet, I'm ready for a recommendation.
Okay, so I was just gonna type these numbers in here, but I got the first line. So I'm gonna make a recommendation. If the cleaning supplies need to go out, that is number 8, 10, 16, 17, and 24. The ineligible one of number 9, we have agreed upon. I've been in contact with the new principal change that asked for quite a bit of money over the summertime. And if she can just re-ask for her EANS 1 to be upped, we can take that out, and that's number 27. And then the final one would be that number 32 was ineligible. I can type this if it would help everyone.
Is that a motion?
That is a motion.
So the
And the
motion,
rest would be approved.
the motion is that we approve everything minus 8, 10, 16, 17, 24, 9, and 32. Have I missed something?
And did you say 27, I believe?
I didn't, but I
Yeah.
will. 27. Okay, is there a second to that motion? Is that a second, Bert? Now, time for discussion. If your camera is off, would you please turn it on so we can see your vote?
You have a couple of questions, Mr. Porter, I think from
Okay.
Adam Prophet and Frank Arwood.
Okay, we'll go in that order. Thank you, Adam. I'm getting behind here. Adam and then Frank.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Dr. Watson. Question as it relates to the cleaning supplies. I know I'm the one that brought it up and asked the level of risk. I thought I heard that the level of risk related to cleaning supplies would be between slim and none, and slim is losing weight. Is that accurate?
That's what I understood.
Yes, that's what I stated.
So if those were put back in by somebody who might look for a friendly amendment, that might be accepted by the maker of the motion.
Yes.
Well, we'll follow this procedure. If you want to make a motion that we amend the motion to put those back in, then we'll vote on the amendment, then we'll vote on the motion.
This is Bert Lewis, and I move we amend to allow those cleaning supplies back in.
Okay, that's 8, 10, 16, 17, and 24. Is there a second to that motion?
Adam Thomas, second.
Okay, that motion has been made and seconded. So we are going, any further discussion on that issue? We're only talking about the amendment now. Okay, a motion has been made and to amend the motion to re-include in the original motion 10, 8, 10, 16, 17, and 24. If this motion is successful, then we will vote on the original motion, including the addition. Frank, did you have a question? Any other questions?
Mine was on, you might want to finish this one because mine's on a separate one. So you might want to finish the amended motion before I ask my question.
Okay. All in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed? Motion, the amendment carried. Frank,
Actually, my question was about number 26, and that was when had been deemed, the para had been deemed ineligible because they'd already hired 2 full-time teachers and with 91 students. That seems like it's enough. So I guess I would, I guess, is that, am I correct in that, Tate?
Yes, that's how we read it. Yes.
So I guess I would move to add number 26 to the excluded list.
is there a second to that motion? Bunch of seconds. We'll give it to Janet. Any further discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed? That motion carries. So we have added back in 8, 10. Let's see. We've added back in 8, 10, 16, 17, and 24, and we have removed the number again. Frank, was that 26?
26.
Okay.
And Janet's done a good job of putting it in the chat as well.
Yes. And so that is your, now that is the motion as amended. Does everybody understand the motion as amended? All in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed? I see no opposition. The motion carries. I need to point out that this is the first time that we've gone overtime. I appreciate your patience. I think that this discussion needed to happen. And I appreciate everybody's willingness to do that. Mike. Did you have a question on premium pay?
No, I'm just being honored. That qualifies us for premium pay.
Can I second?
Uh,
Over.
I've been wanting to say this for many years. Dr. Argabride, you're out of order.
But
When's our
I
next-
do want to address your comment about us going overtime, though. Originally, we were going 3 to 5 o'clock, Chairman Porter. So we're still kind of 40 minutes under it. It is the longest one, but
When's their next meeting?
do you have that in any slide? It would be the
The
December?
Friday before this December state board meeting.
Okay, December the 10th. Yes.
Thank you, Michaela.
Like Michaela has given that to us. Well, thank you very much. Anything else, Tate, Doug, Randy?
Nope, just thank everybody for their service and all the work they're doing to help us along this process.
And thank you very much again, and we are adjourned.